Most of you here know who Brother Doyle Denny is, as well as being a member of our church and a member of our board. Professionally, he is a licensed financial advisor for Edward Jones. And so he's going to teach us a class today on finances. So without further ado, Brother Denny, come forward.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm going to try to do this without a microphone. Can you guys?
You can do it.
Can you hear me? Just fine?
Yeah.
In the back, you can hear me? My wife is back there, so if I mess up too bad, she'll get me straight. Well, Sister Minnie said, my name is Doyle Denny, and most of you here I know. For anyone who I didn't get a chance to meet, I'm a member here at Westwood, and in addition to that, I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones. So we want to say this morning, first of all, thank you for giving up a portion of your Saturday to come out and be here. The purpose of today and my part of your meeting today, your fellowship today, is hopefully just to provide you some basic education in the area of personal finance and investing. Let me ask us this, just to get going this morning. Does anybody here believe that your personal finances can impact your marriage?
Yes.
Anybody believe that your personal finances can have an impact on your health?
Yes.
Anybody here believe that your finances can impact your relationships in your life?
Yes.
How about even our walk with God?
Yes.
So this is an important area. The things that we're going to talk about today, as I present them to you, it's all going to be presented from a very biblical perspective. I still believe the Bible is the very best book on personal finance. I still believe that the Bible is the best reference and the best book on getting along with other people. I still believe that the Bible is the best book that we can buy on building strong families, don't you? Mm-hmm. So with that this morning, I'd like for us just to open with a word of prayer. And if you would, ask that God would use me this morning. There are things that I've prepared that I want to deliver to you. But ask Him that He would touch and anoint me, that I would deliver this in the right way, that you're able to receive it. Ask God that He would touch your mind and your heart, that you would receive this in the spirit that it's being delivered. And that He would give us wisdom in this area of our life. No matter where we are in terms of our own personal financial situation, there's always room to improve. And I believe that there's always opportunity for us to get better as stewards. Don't you? Yes. Let's pray together. Jesus, we're thankful for this time that you have given us this morning, this opportunity to come together and to talk about this subject of finances and how, God, we can be good stewards with the resources that you give us. We ask, God, that in this next hour or so that we're together here in this part of our time today, that you would be with us. I ask, God, for your anointing as we talk about this subject. And I ask for clarity, God, that you would help me to deliver this information as best as I can, God. Let it be received in the spirit that it's being delivered. And I ask this in Jesus' name. The Bible references finances and money over 2,300 times. That's a lot. The Bible has a lot to say on the topic of money and our relationship with money. You know, there's a verse in the Bible that gets misquoted a lot. Some people say that money is the root of all evil, but that's not what the Bible says. What does the Bible say? It's the love of money, and that has a lot to do with our relationship with our money. Do we have money, or does money have us? Do we have things, or do things have us? Do we have possessions, or do our possessions possess us? It all has to do with what is that relationship that we have. There are 39 parables. How many of those parables do you suspect deal with money? It's actually 11. 11 of the 39. So about a third of the parables deal with this subject of money and finances. So with apologies to those of you who have been a part of my adult Sunday school class, I just want to share some random thoughts on money before we really get into our material today. And I apologize to those in my Sunday school class because they've heard some of these before. Here we go. I'm only one step away from being rich. Now all I need is money. My wallet is like an onion. Opening it makes me cry. Anybody relate? Money wouldn't solve all of my problems, but it would solve my money problems. Sometimes all you need is $1 billion. How about this? This is appropriate in a ladies' meeting. Men are a lot like bank accounts. Without a lot of money, they don't generate a lot of interest. The only exercise I've gotten this month is running out of money. Whoever said money can't buy happiness doesn't know where to shop. Life is not about money. Life is about love. Fortunately for me, I love money. I've got 99 problems and money could solve at least 73 of them. They say money talks. Mine just waves goodbye. Always borrow from a pessimist. They don't expect it back. I like this one. A successful man is one who makes more money than his wife can spend. A successful woman is a woman who can find such a man. Yes, money can't buy happiness, but it's more comfortable to cry in a BMW than on a bicycle. Where does all my money go? It's like hocus pocus, I'm brocus. How many can relate to this? I have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life if I die by next Friday. And then this one. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy a jet ski. Have you ever seen a sad person on a jet ski? You can't be sad on a jet ski. One of my favorite quotes about money comes from a book titled, When is Enough Enough? And the quote says this: people spend money they don't have to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. People spend money they don't have to buy things they don't need to impress people they don't like. Let that sink in just a minute. What does that actually mean? Trying to keep up with the Joneses? I don't know who the Joneses are, but I never liked them from the time I was a kid. Because anytime I wanted something, that's what I heard from my mom. Trying to keep up with the Joneses. We can't keep up with the Joneses. Poor Jones people. Those who care most about us, do they really care what kind of car you drive?
No.
what the designer label on your dress or your suit is? They usually don't. Kids don't require a lot. Sometimes we think they do. There's a big scandal going on right now. You've probably read about it, where famous Hollywood-type people apparently have cheated the system to try to get their kids into prestigious colleges, and now it's all being exposed, and college administrators and coaches and all kinds of people are all twisted up in this, and literally people could go to prison just because these people wanted their kids in a prestigious school. Complete the following sayings with me. If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Yeah, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. How about this one? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing time and again and expecting different results. In other words, if we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to keep getting what we've always got. So sometimes there needs to be a catalyst for change. Sometimes we need to call a timeout and take a look at where we are and reflect on where it is we want to be. And if we're not happy in the direction that we're going, we need to do some things differently. Can we agree with that? Those of us who are alive today, we live in the most prosperous time of all of history. We realize that when we look around the world, we look at the modern conveniences that we have today. I mean, most of us came here today in an automobile. We didn't ride a horse or get pulled in a wagon as our ancestors did. We didn't have to walk as our far ancestors did. So, we rode here today in an automobile that has heater and defroster, and we're sitting in a nice building. It's beautiful and well lit, and it has heating and air conditioning, and we're probably going to eat a nice meal somewhere today. And I think a lot of times we begin to take for granted all of the blessings that we have. We tend to look around and begin to compare ourselves against ourselves, and if we're not doing as well as the people down the street or the people we work with, or then we feel pity for ourselves. We get a little bit of the poor me syndrome. But we live in the most prosperous time in all of history. And as Americans, we live in the most prosperous nation in the history of our planet. We really live in the very best of times. And we are so incredibly blessed. And yet we look around and we see people who struggle financially. And we ask ourselves, why is that? I looked up some interesting statistics in advance of this meeting today, and I want to share some of these things with you. And I'm going to reference where the information came from, just so if you want to do further research on it, you can. But these are through calendar year 2018. According to CNBC, 20% of Americans don't save any of their annual income at all. And those who do save aren't putting away very much. Go Banking Rate said over 40% of Americans, listen to this, over 40% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for retirement. Over 40%. In the most prosperous time in the history of our planet, over 40% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for retirement. PurePoint Financial said 56% of millennials don't have any money saved in retirement accounts. 56% of millennials. According to the LA Times, the average American saves less than 5% of his or her disposable income. MarketWatch says that half of American households currently live paycheck to paycheck. In other words, if something happened to that paycheck, they're in dire financial straits immediately. Gallup poll found that about a third of Americans maintain a household budget. Only a third maintain any kind of a household budget. According to FINRA, nearly a third of Americans pay the minimum due on their credit card each month. In other words, they're not paying off the principal, they're just paying the minimum payment that's due on credit cards. Credit card debt comes with a cost. The average household with revolving credit card debt pays $904 in credit card interest every year. Think of what that person could do with that extra $900 a year if they weren't paying it towards credit card interest. According to the latest 2018 data from the Federal Reserve, Americans today hold over $1 trillion in credit card debt. $1 trillion in credit card debt. And Americans paid banks over $104 billion in credit card interest in 2018. That's up 11% from the prior year and up 35% over the last 5 years. According to Finder, 44% of American adults, almost half of us, are relying on an auto loan to pay for our car. Almost half. 43% of Americans spend more than they earn each month and borrow and use credit cards to finance the shortfall. The average credit card debt, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the average credit card debt among Americans increased 18.5% since 2013. So in other words, this problem is only getting worse and not better. But I want to go back and touch base just briefly on a couple of these statistics. Over 40% of Americans have less than $10,000 saved for retirement. Is that not alarming? That's alarming. And 2/3, this is according to the Associated Press, 2/3 of Americans would struggle to come up with $1,000 if they faced an emergency. So let me ask us this morning. Is this a recipe for living an overcoming life? Listening to these statistics, can we see where stress and anxiety and problems could come into people's lives? Those who fall into these categories that we just talked. And again, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. If you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Let's stop doing what's making it worse. I recognize that when we have a group this size, there's usually going to be people all over the financial spectrum. On one side of the spectrum, you're going to have people who don't have money saved, who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are in debt up to their eyeballs. I'm not asking anybody to raise your hands. But people who can't pay their bills consistently every month. It's the reality of the world that we live in. You get a good-sized group together and you're going to have people who fall into that category. On the other end of that spectrum, you're going to have people who don't have any debt, who have money in the bank, who have money saved and put aside for retirement, and they are living a comfortable life. And then you're going to have a lot of people in the middle, okay? So it's my hope and my goal today, and when Sister Minnie asked me to do this, and I reflected on how to approach this, I want to have something that we discuss today that no matter where you are on that spectrum, something that would be of value to you. So if you're struggling to pay your bills and you're just getting started, you just called that all-important time out in your life, and you want to get better from here, you want to do some things different, there's going to be some things that will benefit you. If you have got those basics in place, and you're at a place in your life where you're wanting to do some investing and you're wanting to grow your wealth, then we're going to talk about some things that will help you too. But let's talk first of all about the left side of that spectrum, where people are living who may not have anything saved, people who are living paycheck to paycheck, in debt, maybe aren't able to pay their bills consistently. Can that seem overwhelming? And I don't care where you are today, there's a chance at some time in your life you were in that category. I know I have been. It can feel like things are completely out of control, can't it? It can be emotionally overpowering. It can be emotionally draining. And you can look up and just say, I don't know what to do. I don't know how this is ever going to get better. And the only way to make it better is to just call that time out, look around at the things that you can control, and start controlling those things. Let me ask us this. Who here has heard of Dave Ramsey? Oh, good. Most of you have heard of Dave Ramsey. How many here have read any of Dave Ramsey's books? Okay, so some of us. Has anybody here attended Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University? A couple of people. Okay. So Dave Ramsey talks a lot on the subject of personal finance. And he does so from a biblical perspective of stewardship and being responsible with what we have. He's on the radio, so you'll find him sometime doing radio broadcasts. His teachings have been incorporated into the curriculum of a lot of churches. So the Financial Peace University, oftentimes when it's taught at a church because the principles do line up with very biblical standards. So even in my business of what I do, I have recommended a lot of Dave Ramsey's material to my clients, those who have come in and said, look, I don't know where to start, but I know what I'm doing is not working. Can you help me? And in a lot of cases, the first thing that I'll do is I'll ask them to go on Amazon and spend $1 or $2 and buy the book in paperback, Total Money Makeover, that's written by Dave Ramsey. Total Money Makeover really challenges a person to look at their relationship with money. Are they using money as a tool and as a resource, or are they a servant to money? Are they making poor decisions that are just getting that hole deeper and deeper and deeper? So we're not going to do a Dave Ramsey seminar today, but what I do want to do is Dave Ramsey has 7 steps. When you read his material, his book, Total Money Makeover, Financial Peace, Money Matters, he incorporates this concept of 7 steps to financial peace. And I do at least want to touch on these today. So I'm going to run through them very quickly, and then we're going to get into some additional material. The first step that he talks about in his Financial Peace and Total Money Makeover, step 1 is save $1,000 for your starter emergency fund. And I will tell you, as we go through this material today, you're going to see that there's no magic pill for getting your finances where you want them to be. It takes discipline. It takes doing the right thing over a period of time. But if you do these things, you can conquer your finances. It's been proven to work over and over and over again. So he says the first step is save $1,000 for your starter emergency fund. Your emergency fund will cover those unexpected life events that you can't plan for. Without an emergency fund, most people feel like they have to go into debt, usually it's credit card debt, to deal with an unexpected surprise like a medical bill or a car repair or something like that. So we want to insulate ourselves from those most basic surprises in life, and we can do that by putting at least $1,000 aside into savings. That's step one, very basic step. Get $1,000 saved in a savings account. Step two is pay off the rest of your debt. And that may seem overwhelming. That may seem like, wow, I can only dream of doing that. I don't have the resources. But what he introduces is a very basic strategy for how you do that. And he says this: start by listing all of your debts outside of your mortgage. Write them down. The cars, the student loans, the credit cards, the store cards, the gas cards. Put them in order by balance from the smallest to the largest. Don't worry initially about interest rates. Just look at the size of the debt and put them in order, smallest to largest. Then attack the first one first. So the smallest one first. Get rid of it. Then take the money that you're paying on that one and attack the next one. He calls that concept a debt snowball. So just like Popeye used to line up all the bad guys and knock them out one by one, just go down, that's what he's talking about. You get all your debts lined up, smallest to largest, get that first one knocked out, then take the money that you were applying on that one, put it towards the next one, get it paid off, and you just go right down the line until you get them all paid off. Okay? Everything except your house. And in this, he challenges people to look at what you're spending. If you're spending $400 a month on a car payment, can you drive a less expensive car? Can you get out from under some of that debt? So look at every payment that you have and ask, do I really need a 2-year-old car? Can I drive a 5-year-old car and lower my payment or get out from under that payment altogether? So wherever the money's going, one of the big problems that people have in managing their finances is they don't really understand where their money goes. So he challenges people to document every dime that you're spending every month. Where does it go? Take that ownership. Take that responsibility. So step 2 is to pay through your debts using that debt snowball method. Line them up, smallest to largest. Get rid of them all except your home mortgage. Okay? Step 3 is we're going to come back and visit that emergency fund. And he says this. He says, you want to put together 3 to 6 months of your living expenses in that emergency fund. That way, if you dealt with the loss of a job or some major expense, you're not having to go back into debt. So you have 3 to 6 months of your expenses put aside in this emergency fund. Step 4 is to start to invest. Now we've got all the debts paid off, right? And this, depending on where you are and how much debt you have, this could take anywhere from a few months to a few years to get through this process. But the next step is to begin to invest 15% of your household income towards your retirement. So if you have a 401k offered at work, start putting money into your 401k. If you don't have a 401k, open up an IRA and start putting that money in. There's a lot of tax advantages now and later on to squirreling that money away into a 401k or an IRA. 15%, that's the goal. Step 5 is to begin to save for your children's college if you have children at home. Why? Because it gives them such a kickstart in life. If you look at the statistics, and this is very broad, this is very general, certainly there are exceptions to every rule, but if you look at the general statistics, kids coming out of high school today who go to college will earn twice as much over their lifetime as kids who don't. Raw statistics. Why wouldn't we want to give our kids that best chance in life? And then step 7, he says this. You know what you can do when you have no debt? Pretty much what you want to. And that's exactly it. I heard people say give. So he says in the step 7, now you can live and give like nobody else. This is where you continue to build wealth and you become generous. Imagine what it would be like to leave an inheritance for your kids and your grandchildren. This is all possible now because you had the discipline for a few years. Now you're able to leave a legacy. So those are the 7 steps that when you read and you study Dave Ramsey's writings on personal finance, he incorporates those into all that he does. I saw a hand back here. Angela?
I think we all did.
You missed number 6? You all did?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, were you not paying attention? Boy, this is a slow group. If you all missed a whole...
It's the mortgage.
My apologies. It's because I didn't cover step 6. Step 6 is to pay off the mortgage. I apologize for that. Yeah. Step 6, pay the home off early.
He probably doesn't have a mortgage payment, so.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So, essentially, once you've paid off all of the other debt, other than the mortgage, you're now saving for retirement. Now you can focus on attacking that mortgage. If you're in a 30-year mortgage, refinance it down to a 15-year mortgage. Or if your principal payment is $200 a month, double up on the principal payment so that you knock that mortgage out in 10 years instead of 30. Or if you have 15 years left on a 30-year mortgage, you knock that 15 years out in 7 years just by applying some of these principles. There's different ways that you can do it. Deborah, did that answer your question as well? You didn't have step 6 either? So that's the basic. You know what? A person is not going to be able to build wealth until you have those basic financial principles of stewardship in place in your life. And regardless of where you are on that continuum, it's hard to move ahead until you get those building blocks, those basic building blocks of financial stewardship in place. Does that make sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. Hopefully for a lot of you that was review, but for those of you who may be hearing this for the first time, that's where you start. So back to, I believe it was step 4 on the 7 steps. He talks about investing 15% of your household income in retirement. So for people who are in that situation where you've at least got the basics in place, you're not living paycheck to paycheck, you've got most of your debts taken care of, now it's time to invest. Where do we start? So if I can have Sister Minnie help me. And I'm probably not going to have enough for every person, but if there's maybe families can share or people who rode together could at least share. And then if we have extra, we'll come back and distribute some more. But what you have there is a brochure called Rules of the Road. And this Rules of the Road brochure, it's a very nice brochure that's put out by Edward Jones. And it really just addresses the basic principles of saving and investing. And I'll give her just a minute to get those distributed. So we're going to have a few additional copies if somebody else needs one? Everybody have one, or at least have one that you can share with? Okay. If you would open up the brochure to rule number 1, again, these are basic rules for investing. Rule number 1 is to develop a strategy. Most people spend more time planning their vacations than they do planning for their financial future.
Yes.
There needs to be some on-purpose thinking about our finances and our financial goals, where we want to go, what do we want to do. And a lot of this gets into your length of time to invest, how comfortable are you with risk. A lot of times people at this step will enlist the help of a financial planner, financial advisor, okay? I know we have people here from out of state and from all over the place, but there are good financial professionals. We go to health professionals to help us with our health. We go to legal professionals to help us with our legal issues. Financial professionals are there to assist us in planning out our finances for the future and accomplishing our long-term goals. So the first step is just to really develop that specific strategy, get it written down, because that really guides and governs our decisions moving forward. Where do we want to be in 5 years? If I want to retire at age 65 and I'm now 51, how much money am I going to need to accumulate to give me the retirement income that I need? There's an awful lot of people who have had to go back to work after they retired because they didn't have a good strategy in place, and after a couple of years they looked at how quickly they were burning through their money and they said, you know what, this isn't going to make it. And they've had to go back to work. So you want to measure twice and cut once, according to the old carpenter's rule. So know your goals, know what it's going to take, and a lot of times a financial professional can help you to get that plan in place. Rule number 2 is you need to understand risk. With any investment, there is a certain element of risk. So risk and return generally go hand in hand. The higher return you're looking for, typically speaking, the greater levels of risk that you are going to have to be prepared to take on. So Sister Minnie, again, if I could get your help. Angie, can you come help as well? Oh, never mind. We got it covered. So the chart that they are passing out now is a chart that looks at diversification. And I'll give her just a second to get those distributed. There's plenty of these, by the way. So there's enough of these for everybody to have one. Should be. When you look at this chart, a couple of things are gonna jump off the page to you. One is there's a lot of colors. I'm a very simple thinker. I call this the jelly bean chart because there's a lot of colors, pretty colors. And if you look at this, there's really a lot of information on this page. But the thing to know, if you look at the far left column, okay, and you look at these boxes from top to bottom, each one of these boxes represents an investment allocation strategy. So, large cap growth investments, international investments, commodities, small and mid cap stocks, almost anything you could invest in is contained in one of these buckets. Large cap value investments, cash, bonds, global bonds. At the very bottom, there's real estate investment trusts. And then you look at the years on the top from 1999 all the way over to 2018. And if you follow that investment category year by year and track it, what you'll find is that most of them do this. most of them do this up and down pattern over that 20-year period. The reason that I like to look at this 20-year period is because in this 20-year period, we had the dot-com crash of 2000, 2001, and 2002. Anybody remember that?
Mm-hmm.
We also had the mortgage crisis of 2008. Those two market periods are the worst markets in any of our lifetimes. So that 20-year period is a fairly conservative look at investment returns over a two-decade period, okay? Right in the middle of the chart, you'll see a black box called diversified portfolio. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you follow that line all the way through from left to right, you'll see it's never at the top, it's never at the bottom. It just kind of drifts along there in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So when I work with clients and I build them out portfolio strategies, this is where we try to build them, is in a portfolio of diversified investments. In investing, diversification is your friend. Time is your friend. So the younger a person is, when they start investing, the more time they have to accumulate over a number of years, the greater the likelihood they're going to be able to build wealth. They say that the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
The next best time to plant one is today, right? So wherever we are, whatever we've done or whatever we haven't done, the sooner that we start, I don't think any of us are going to be any younger tomorrow than we are today. So no matter where we are, the sooner that we can start getting money working for us, the better chance that we have of seeing that snowball grow larger and larger. But what this chart tells us is, over the last 20 years, a diversified portfolio would have generated an average return of over 6%. So 6% per year, and I'm going to show you in a minute what that compounding effect looks like in terms of real dollars. So we want to have an understanding of risk because each of these categories carries more risk than some of the others. Monies that we put in cash is not going to be subject to market volatility, but does cash grow?
No.
It really doesn't. And what happens to cash sitting in the bank over time? You lose your purchasing power because of inflation, right? Because inflation eats away your purchasing power at about 2% to 3% per year. So $100 in the bank today, next year is only going to buy you about $98 worth of stuff. Why? Because the cost of stuff is going to go up between now and next year.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it doesn't make a lot of sense to leave a lot of money sitting in cash. Because eventually, inflation eats away at that purchasing power. So I know that's a lot to digest, but is that helpful to see what returns in those various categories look like over a period of time? Rule 3, diversifying for a solid foundation. So we talked a little bit about the different investment categories, and then that black box is what's called a diversified portfolio, where in a diversified portfolio, you would have a little bit from all of those investment categories. Depending on your willingness to take on risk in your portfolio, you might have some international assets, you might have some growth assets, some growth and income assets. So you would have that a tailored portfolio built out to your risk tolerance and your expectation for growth over the next 10, 15, 20 years, whatever your timetable is. Rule 4 is to stick with quality. In the area of investing, you don't want to fall for somebody calling you with a hot stock tip. You got to get this investment right now. And you want to be careful about going into things where you're locked into something for a long period of time or where you're going to have to pay exit costs to get out of certain investments. So you want to really know and understand what you're putting your money into.
Can I ask a question right here?
Yes.
Okay, when you say that long-term investment locked into, can you give me a number, months, years, what are we talking about here?
Well, in the world of investments, there are front-end costs a lot of times that you pay to have a company or an investment take on your investment dollars, okay? Some of those products are through brokerages, some of them are through banks, some can be through insurance companies. There are products out there are stocks and there are bonds and there are mutual funds, and there's different ways that you can get into those investments and different ways to come out of those investments. But some of them have costs on both ends. So monies to get in and monies to come out. A lot of times, especially with annuities, you've heard of annuities?
Mm-hmm.
With annuities, a lot of times you have a surrender period, what's called a surrender period, where at least for the first 7 years, if you attempt to take your money out, you would pay a lot of back-end expenses to get your money out. I was dealing a couple weeks ago with a client in California who has an annuity, and it actually has a 14-year surrender period. 14 years. And it would have cost 14% of whatever they put in for them to get their money out in year 1, 13% in year 2, 12% in year 3. So you just want to know, you want to ask those questions of the financial professional you're dealing with so that you have a good understanding. If I put my money into this, what are the consequences if I take it out? Now, saying that, annuities make perfectly good sense in a lot of cases. We offer annuities through Edward Jones, and there are perfectly good applications for annuities. But generally speaking, annuities have long surrender periods. So you just want to know, for that portion of your money, you're putting it in, you're making a long-term commitment to that strategy. We don't recommend at Edward Jones, we don't recommend that a person put any more than about 1/3 of their investable assets into annuities, because they're just not as liquid. You can get money out of a CD, you can get money out of a stock, you can sell the stock, you can sell a bond, you can sell a mutual fund. You may have some expenses to come out of those. And then after a certain period of time, after the surrender period, you may want to reevaluate whether that annuity product still makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you in a very short period of time. This is not intended to be an exhaustive education on all of these strategies. It's intended to give you just a good overview. But I do want to show you an example of this. We may have to share. I don't know exactly how many copies are there, but where we can buddy up, it would be beneficial. But I want to show you an example of a long-term investment strategy. What you have in this brochure says MFS in the upper right-hand corner. MFS is a company called Massachusetts Financial Services. Massachusetts Financial Services introduced the concept of the mutual fund back in 1924. So this brochure gives you the information about that original mutual fund. Now, I'm giving you this not because I'm encouraging you to go out and invest in Massachusetts Investors Trust, which is what this fund is. This is strictly educational. So don't leave here going, well, Brother Denny said we ought to go put money in this. Can if you want to. That's not the purpose of this. But I use this just as an illustration because it'll help you understand how a mutual fund works. Okay? The reason that Massachusetts Financial Services introduced the concept of the mutual fund in 1924 is because in 1924, if you will open your brochure to page 4, in 1924, this is the cost of one share of stock in all of these different companies. So if you look at this page 4, first column, if you wanted to buy shares of stock in Boston Insurance Company, how much was one share of stock? $682. If you wanted to buy stock in American Radiator Company, how much was one share? $102. Okay, now follow me here. In 1924, you could not buy one share of stock in a company. You had to buy in what are called round lots of 100 shares. So if you wanted to buy into Boston Insurance Company in 1924, you had to write a check for $68,000 in 1924. If you wanted to buy American Radiator, you had to write a check for $10,200. Who had that kind of money in 1924?
No one.
Only the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans of the world. Wall Street investing was only for the rich in 1924. It was a rich man's game. So this company, Massachusetts Investors Trust, said, you know what? There should be a way that we can enable average Americans, average people, to participate in Wall Street investing. So they came up with this concept of the mutual fund, and they said, we will go out and buy shares in all these companies. And then we will sell people one share of our mutual fund so that they can participate in investing in these companies. What you'll see in the second column are the 45 largest holdings by Massachusetts Investors Trust, which is this original mutual fund. Yes, this fund is still in operation today. Since 1924, this fund is still in operation today, and these are the 45 largest holdings. If you go down that list, I guarantee you recognize almost every single one of those names. Okay? So how is it done? In the middle of your brochure, if you'll open it up, you'll see a chart that looks like this. So if you can all open that up. What you'll see, if you had put money into this fund in 1924, when you look out to 1929, you see those red boxes at the bottom? Guess what happened in 1929, 30, 31? The Great Depression. The stock market crashed, the Great Depression, the worst economy the world has ever seen, the Great Depression. So if you would have put money into this fund in 1924, 5 years later, after the Great Depression, you would have lost 70% of your money. And you would have been saying, Brother Denny, that was the stupidest thing I could have ever done. Now I've lost 70% of what I put in. And you would have been right. Okay? If you would have sold